welcome to Biztalk, a program which we will discuss about the national key economic areas and companies which are involved directly or indirectly with the economic transformation program. And I am your host for tonight, Putri Mahirah Mizanuddin. And for this week, we have a very interesting topic to discuss about the game development industry in Malaysia. And with the topic Game on Malaysia, we are very lucky tonight to have our special guest, Tan Ching Ike, the head of School for Computing and Creative Media, KDU University College. Welcome to the show, Ike.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, good. Good to have you on the show, and I can't wait for you to share with us about what's going on with the game development cluster. But before that, can you please share with us about yourself or your experience?
Well, I started my career in graphic design, in fact. After a few years of graphic design, I went to do visual effects, did a bit of TV commercials, and then I delved into, when the dot-com boom came up, I went into doing shockwave games, yeah? And I think that was one of the first few times where I actually got my hands dirty with games, so to speak. About a few years later, I went into education, yeah? And that's where I've been for the past 10 years. And the funny thing was, in one of the institutes that I was in between classes, I did a bit of, played a bit of games, and it so happened during that time, someone from the UK came down, a university from the UK came down, and they were particularly interested in finding a university in Malaysia to work with. And their rationale was, look, the games industry is going to come down to Southeast Asia. I mean, it's for cost-effective reasons. And at the time, they were saying that, hey, this guy plays a lot of games. Let's just send him to the UK. And I basically went to the UK, did my master's there, and I sat into some of the classes in games development. It was 2 years there. I came back here and I established the games a course in another private university. And I think things have grown since then. True enough, a lot of the games industries have actually come down and set up shop in Malaysia. Yeah, Codemasters Studios is one of them. Ubisoft, arguably one of the top 5 game development centers in the world, yeah, is in Singapore. Lucasfilm, the one that does Star Wars, Clone Wars, they're in Singapore as well. So you see a lot of these international companies coming down to Southeast Asia.
Why do you think that they particularly choose Malaysia? What is the potential that they see in this country?
Well, let's just talk about Southeast Asia first. Yeah, I think the reason why Southeast Asia, I suppose it has to do with cost. Yeah, definitely. If I'm going to pay someone in the UK to do art or programming for me, if I pay them 3,000 to 5,000 pounds, and you convert that into Malaysian currency, I can afford to bring in 5 people, 6 equally talented, if not better people. Yeah, and why Malaysia? I mean, if you to compare Malaysia with Singapore, even Malaysia with Thailand, I suppose the beauty of it is we also speak their language. Yeah, and Malaysians are surprisingly talented, and they are really creative people. Yeah, and I guess that's why they chose Malaysia. Stability, infrastructure, yeah, and talents as well.
Okay, so you have jumped from the private sector to the education sector. Now, tell us about the development of the game cluster industry and how does it fit to ETP? Right.
I think to understand what the ETP is all about, we first have to see the essence of what the Economic Transformation Program. Basically, in the words of Datuk Sri Idris Jala, it's to make everyone rich together for a long, long time. So it's about inclusiveness, it's about high income generating, and it's about sustainability. Yeah, and I think a lot of Malaysians don't know this. The games development scene in Malaysia has been around since the early 90s. Yeah, in those days, the people usually did what is known as outsourcing. So we did the art assets for companies in the US, the UK, and Japan, and Well, basically, we just develop the content for them. The credits don't come to Malaysia, yeah? And that was in the early 90s. But I suspect, being Asians, there is a negative connotation with games. You know? So people tend to think game development equals gaming. And gaming equals cyber cafes, equals
and
arcades.
loitering around.
Right. And as a result of that, I think we didn't capitalize on that fact. And we didn't build our talent pool to like I said, capitalize on that fact, you know. And fast forward to 2012, some of the biggest games companies are in fact in Southeast Asia. But the danger is this: insufficient talents leads to a constrained growth, which leads to talent leakages, which leads to insufficient talent. So it's a vicious cycle. And if we don't address the insufficient talent bit, we may not be able to grow. And that is what the ETP My Game Dev 2020 is all about. Our main objective is to build up a critical mass of skilled talent in Malaysia. Yeah? And the second part is, of course, branding and awareness, to let the Malaysian people know that, hey, there is a great career opportunity in games, and the games industry worldwide is huge.
Right. Okay, before we discuss further, we have a package done by our journalist, Nabila Yasmin, on KDU. So let's take a look.
Established in 1983 and a pioneer in Malaysian private education, KDU College has continued to be an innovative leader in Malaysia through its SMART initiative. Over the years, the KDU Education Division may have grown in size and strength, but its commitment remains the same: to provide quality education, be it in academics or life in general. KDU offers a wide range of programs at certificate, diploma, degree and master's levels. And one of the courses offered in KDU is game development, a curriculum that involves a combination of technical disciplines like software engineering and creative disciplines like art and music to implement a game design in a playable real-world format. And there are 3 different main fields in game development program provided by KDU, which are game art, game design and game technology. In the 3-year course, students are taught the 3 basic elements in game development, including softwares and skills, and are required to do projects and practical training to complete their studies.
Basically, the program run by KDU is very industry driven. The point is that the industry is competent talent in Malaysia, and the quality is important part rather than quantity. There's a lot of people who want to make games, but the question is whether they are capable or they actually have the skills to do it. So the main point is that actually to improve the competency, which means improving the quality. And the best way to do that is basically to make sure that the students learn from the industry players. And that, I think, one of the key points of the KDU game course, where the lecturers are mostly industry experienced academics.
KDU's game development studio is fully equipped with Alienware desktops and games research and recreation room with the latest games and consoles, and is also working closely with Codemasters Studio to help ensure real industry methods and standards are taught in their games development course. With huge demand in production values and rising costs of development, the industry has seen a shift in acquisition of creative talent. Also, the lack of specialized and qualified skilled workers have created a need for people who are specially trained and competent in the workflow of game development studies. Over the years, the game industry is indeed one of the fastest growing industry in the world, and the landscape of game industry in Malaysia has rapidly changed, and the situation indirectly opens up job opportunities for the graduates.
We recognize the fact that in order to properly teach game development to our students, we cannot simply focus them down on one path. For example, we can train artists, but if they don't have any exposure to programmers or designers, they will not know how to collaborate with them and how to effectively work as a team. That is why we created a course with 3 different streams working together, so that when they go into the industry, they will know how to collaborate with people not in their field but also working on a game. Number two is that we make sure that we have close ties with the industry and we hire people with industry experience, because we understand that the industry changes really, really fast. And we need people in the industry to come and tell us how games are made now, what is the market demands now, so that we can prepare the students so that in the 2-3 years later when they graduate, they'll be ready for the industry. And that's how we do it.
Malaysia currently has between 500 to 700 people working specifically in the game industry, and companies that produce this kind of content are sizable in the country. The game industry has major impact on the economy through the sales of major systems in games such as Call of Duty, Black Ops, which took in over $650 million of sales in the game's first 5 days.
With the emergence of games industry in Malaysia, we can see that there are actually a potential market for game developer in Malaysia. Nabila Yasmin Muhammad Razib, Biztalk.
Thank you, Nabila, for the package. And let's get back to our guest today, Tan Shin Ike from KD University College. Right, you were saying about brand awareness. Why is there a need for brand awareness for the game development industry?
Again, like what I said just now, being in a very Asian environment, a lot of the parents, in fact, when the parents are thinking of career options for the kids, it's usually law, engineering,
yeah, that's very
business,
typical
medical,
Asian parents.
definitely. But we want them to know that there is a possible alternate career track, and we want them to know that games is a viable career choice. I mean, a lot of people don't know that games industry is huge worldwide, and we're talking about potentially a $60 to $70 billion industry, and that's US $670 billion industry. And a lot of people have said that the games industry is bigger than the music industry, than the movie industry, and the book industry all put together. It's a huge, I mean, entertainment industry is huge. Yeah?
What is the current scale of Malaysian game industry right now?
Sadly, I think Malaysia has a very small market share at the moment, and we're looking at less than probably 5%. Yeah?
And what is our target?
If you ask me, I would like to have 10% of the market share, definitely. Yeah.
And you think it's a very achievable target for the moment?
Definitely. Like I said before as well, what we need to have are the talent pool. I think we have what is known as a medium-term goal and the long-term goal. I think for the medium-term goal, we need to bring in the likes of Codemasters, yeah, the other games industry people out there, companies from Japan, companies from Korea, companies from the United States. And the only reason why they would want to come here is if they see that they can find the necessary talents in Malaysia. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ike. And we'll take a short break right now, and when we come back, we'll discuss further. Welcome back to Biztalk. If you have any comments, you can email us at biztalk@bernama-tv.com, or you can tweet us at biztalk502, or you can call us right now at 0326937008. And right now we're discussing on the game development industry with our guest for today, Tan Shin Ike from KD University College. Okay, back to our discussion, Ike. Just how big is the games industry now anyway?
Okay, firstly, just call me Ike. Yeah.
Ike.
Well, you're talking about worldwide?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's potentially 70 billion USD. Yeah. And we're talking about just the bread and butter game development. We're not even talking about online games. We're not even talking about multi MMORPGs. Yeah. But basically, it's a huge industry. Yeah. And as I was saying before, Malaysia has a very, very small market share right now. So I think our immediate goal is to bring in the people, the foreign direct investors, the games companies, so to speak, from Korea, from Japan, from the United States. And one of the only ways to do it is the critical mass of skilled talents. I mean, there are other economic and social factors as well, and we're talking about, we may need to have infrastructures, incentives and everything, but I think the main focus is talents for these companies.
Speaking of talents and creating skilled talents, what is KDU's plan with this?
Well, we have launched our Bachelor of Game Development, and the unique part about this bachelor's is actually incorporates 3 of the main streams in games development. Basically games design, games art and games technology. These 3 components, in actual fact, are actually degree programs by itself in other universities. But what we have done is we have actually put all 3 components together. And the students don't learn all 3, definitely not. But what happens is the students have the opportunity to specialize in one particular area by the 2nd semester. Yeah, and these 3, our bachelor's actually allows for all 3 of these students in all 3 streams to actually work together. And that's actually what's required in the industry nowadays. The industry people don't want generalists. They don't want what is known as the Nescafe 3-in-1. Yeah, they want people which are specialized.
You don't want jack of all trades, but rather specialized.
And specialization is what we're talking about when it comes to skilled talents. So that's what KDU is. That's our contribution to basically create talents in these specialized areas.
The fact that the ETP program handpicked KDU as their game development hub, what is the strength in KDU that can produce such skilled talent pool?
I think our major strength is our people. What we have done is we have managed to bring together a huge bunch of academics from the industry, and these are industry players. Most of them were the early pioneers in game development in Malaysia.
Like yourself, I suppose?
Well, I'm more of a strategic person, but we're talking about people who have actually got, who actually produce games, yeah, and have game credits to their names. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to our next questions, we have an issue package, and let's take a look.
All right. One of the key barriers of growing talent in this industry, of course, is that the perception that the games industry is very much low grade, there's no money in it. Even if you look at the BM translation of games, is permainan. So even when we've talked to ministers and so on in the past, they always look at games and they see the first word permainan, and it's not serious. They forget that the games industry now really is not just about your typical Halo, Battlefield, games like that, but we're talking about apps. We're talking about simulation, game-based learning. The games engine is so prevalent in many applications now that you use, from simulation, particularly, I mean, look at car industry design, so on. So we have to tell and inform, youngsters that it's not just about games, but you're developing applications that has so many facets in the real world, beyond just developing a game that, like an Angry Bird and so on. You're talking about games that affect education, affect, for example, simulating flooding, simulating town planning, things like that. It's all using games engine. So you can apply games technology into many areas now. So we're doing a lot of that sort of work with the universities in propagating the idea that games is a huge, serious business. Now, just looking at facts and figures of the games industry, it is as big as the Hollywood movie industry. In fact, the amount of investment put into games is equivalent or even more so than of the film industry and animation. You're seeing 8.3% average economic growth in the games industry, and that is better than any other sector, frankly speaking. Also, if you look at the number of the revenue being earned in the games industry is huge. I mean, some of the facts and figures I can give is that in 2014, we're anticipating almost nearly $80 billion US worth of revenue being generated in the games industry. 1/3 of that in the console sector, or 1/3 in the PC sector, and the other third will be in the mobile device sector. And the mobile device sector, you just look at Apple downloads, for example. In 2011, there were about 10 billion downloads of applications from the iOS store. In 2012, there were 25 billion downloads. That's double. And this year alone, January 2013, Apple reached 40 billion downloads. So another doubling of, so you're talking about, I mean, a double growth every year, year on year. And this is just the iOS store. You just imagine on Android. And imagine that half of those downloads may be free, but the other half are paid downloads. And you're talking about an average of $1 per download. So you're already talking about 20 billion US dollars revenue. So you can imagine, include that into the Android market, the Windows 8 market that's going to come up, and other online markets. It's huge potential, and that's going to grow.
That was Nicholas Shariff Collins from Codemasters. He was talking about the perception that the game industry is a playful one. So how do you bust this myth?
Well, that's actually quite true because, not true in the sense that the myth is true. A lot of people tend to think that when you join a games development course, all you do is play games. Yeah, parents think that, the students definitely think that. But the reality is these people do not have, I mean, they would have to play games, if only to see how games are done. Yeah, but a lot of the time and effort is actually into developing a game.
Right.
And I was explaining just now about game art, games design, and games technology. So it depends on which stream a student chooses. If let's say they choose game art, then the reality is they would have to do a lot of things like concept art, 3D animation, 3D modeling, and they have to make, for example, models that look realistic.
Wow.
If you look at Codemasters games, their methodology is to create this thing called the weathering process. That means, if you walk out in the real world, nothing looks new. Yeah, you have scratches on the table, you have rust, you have a bit of chip paint, and that is an art form. And the students spend a lot of time perfecting this art form. And we're talking about late nights. We're talking about rendering that takes...
It's really hard work.
It is very hard work, especially when you talk about programming as well. Games technology is about programming. And when we talk about programming, we're talking about working through like thousands of lines of codes. And even a little dot somewhere in between will cause the code to not compile properly.
Wow.
And they have to spend additional hours and days, if not weeks, trying to solve all these issues. So games is not all fun and games. There's a lot of hard work, a lot of blood, sweat and tears involved. Yeah.
That's great. You mentioned game art. What's the difference between game art, game design and game technology?
Well, game art deals with the visual aspect of a game. That's the one that talks about the aesthetics. When you play a game, you see the graphics, you go like, wow, that looks really real. And that's what a game artist does. Yeah. Games programming, on the other hand, involves the back-end part of the game. So that's the one that makes the physics environment, the environment, when you shoot something, it explodes, and when you fall down, and especially when a car game, when you drive the car, gravity, physics, collision detection, that's games technology. Involves a lot of physics, a lot of maths. Yeah. And lastly, games design. That's basically to make the game fun. Yeah, the background behind the game, the gameplay, the mechanics. Games design is basically what keeps people up awake way past 12, 1 o'clock at night, just playing a game, say, I can get through this level, and that's a job of games designer.
To create the addiction to the game.
I wouldn't use the word addiction, yes, addiction to the game, yeah.
Right. Okay, we have seen Malaysian companies getting involved with international movies post-production. Like we have Life of Pi, Yogi Bear, X-Men. But how is the game industry important to Malaysia? Why?
Well, it's about creating content. I think when we talk about games, we're talking about a creative economy, yeah, and that's why if we look at Singapore, Singapore has no natural resources,
Yes.
yeah, to speak of, and they rely on their talent pool. So we're talking about mind power, we're talking about innovation, we're talking about creativity, and I think the way forward is for us to tap into the creative economy.
Right.
So we're talking about intellectual property, we're talking about content development, and if you look at what MDEC, for example, is doing, what the various the Ministry of Science, Information and Technology is doing, they get it right, mostly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about developing content. Yeah, and I think content is the way forward.
Before this, we have developers in Malaysia creating art assets
Yes,
for
correct.
foreign companies. But this time around, we have to take credits for all our work. So how do you actually push our local talents to actually go forward and create their own masterpiece and claim credit for it?
That's actually being done right now. There are, again, it's all about the branding and awareness part. A lot of Malaysians don't know that we have actually a Malaysian developer who's actually developed an entire racing engine.
Wow.
Yeah, but all that's missing right now is looking for the proper people to fund it. Yeah, but I suppose when we talk about games, a lot of people have this perception of the typical AAA titles, the big, huge games, you know, Assassin's Creed and everything. That's fine and well, but with the introduction of the iOS devices, yeah, the iStore with Apple and all those devices, what has happened is it has allowed the average developer a level playing field. Because in the past, the hardest thing for a developer to do was to get their game published and distributed. But with things like Apple Store, with things like Steam, it allows an average developer, yeah, in his room with a few friends, develop something, sell it for US 99 cents, and get 1 million people to buy it, and there you have it. Yeah, and that is actually the success of Angry Birds and the likes. It's all simple, small development.
All right. Before we discuss further, we'll take a short break right now, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to Biztalk. Hello, welcome back to Biztalk. If you have any comments, you can email us at biztalk@bernama-tv.com, or you can tweet us at biztalk502, or you can call us at 0326937008. And we're still discussing about the game development industry in Malaysia with our guest Tan Chin Ike, the head of School of Computing and Creative Media, KDU University College. Right, Ike, you were talking about developing games in Malaysia, and I want to ask you, what about the governmental support that we have towards the industry?
Well, I suppose the very fact that Pemandu has allowed or has given us the opportunity to start an entry point project on game development, that speaks volume on the government support. I think on a longer term, yeah, what we could do is more incentives for the foreign direct investors coming down to Malaysia. That's one, and possibly for them on the hiring of our local talents as well. I think on the whole, I think the government has been really supportive, and they have actually understood that, you know, the creative economy is a way to go, actually.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Before we continue, we have another issue package from Nicholas Shariff Collins from Codemasters. So let's hear it.
Key to growing talent, I think, for Malaysia is to ensure that there is stronger industry and academic collaboration. One of the things we've seen when we've gone for recruitment is that a lot of the graduates coming into the market just have no idea how to work within a studio environment, don't understand, are not great at the design side or the innovation side. Usually when they start their degree course, it's, 2 years ago, they're learning technology that was only relevant 2 years ago. Now the technology has moved on. So those sort of things need to be addressed, and you can only address that through industry. The other aspect that the academics side needs to look at is the fundamentals. For example, we are an art studio. A lot of the graduates we're seeing coming out of colleges are multimedia graduates. So they're learning a lot of things in 2 years, but they're not specialized. So they have a general knowledge of the industry and aspects of the industry, but nothing that can be particularly relevant. I think there need to be more specialist courses at universities. We need coders, designers, and artists in this industry. You can't have someone who knows all of them. He knows a bit of everything, but you need specialists in each area. So the universities and colleges need to focus on developing good coders, developing good designers, and developing good artists in those streams. And this is where, you know, the dialogue with industry has to take place. To be honest, talent is the key issue for us. I mean, we have to develop our own training program here. We have never been able to directly hire people straight into our company. We've found graduates who have a basic knowledge but just don't have that quality. So that's why we created our own Codemasters Accelerator program, which is available to everyone, basically. And it's not just for our staff hire, but it's for the industry as well. It's basically a 3-month course that will really upgrade their portfolio and their skill level to be able to work for a AAA standard studio like ourselves. And we've had to do that, and it costs us a lot of money because, again, the graduates are not coming out there. We hope to address that through the My Game Dev by working with the colleges and universities, but we don't see that quality will become available until in about 3 years' time when the current batch comes through. So within the next 3 years, we have to really retrain, redevelop, and reskill people seriously. And now we're looking at the coding aspect. We have the artists, we have the program for that. Now we're looking at the coding aspect, the programmers, and designers. There are not enough good designers with good ideas in Malaysia. So I think this goes back to the primary and secondary school level, where we have to encourage creative thinking in our kids. Encourage them. It's not about being an A student or a B student. It's about being a creative student. We don't, for example, when we look to hire people, we don't care what degree or what university or college you came from. You don't even have to have a degree to come here. We just ask, what is your skill? Show us your portfolio. Show us what you've done. So you may be a D grade student, but you may be a great artist. We'll hire you. So we find those sort of people much more attractive hire because they're very creative, they're out of the box thinkers. And we need more of that in Malaysia. That is the way we will progress.
All right, that was Nicholas Shariff Collins from Codemasters, and he mentioned just now how it is so hard for his company to locate and pull skilled talents, quality graduates. So for KDU's program, do you actually help your graduates to find jobs in big companies, big game developers?
Well, definitely. What we do is, by the end of the final year, we will have student projects ready. And what we do is we actually involve the industry. So the last time we had our end of the year showcase, we actually called people like Codemasters. We brought down Ubisoft from Singapore and a lot of the local developers as well. So what they would do is they would see the student works. If they like them, they would hire them. And that's what happened to 3 of our senior students. They were actually snapped up immediately. Yeah. But at the same time, it's a platform for us to actually get the industry feedback on where the course should go. And the beauty about the KDU's game development course is that we are extremely industry driven. Again, like I was saying before, most of our lecturers are from the industry and are the pioneers in the game development industry. But we also make sure that our course, the content and the curriculum are in line with what the industry wants and requires. So our content, or rather our curriculum, was developed in conjunction or in collaboration with Codemasters Studios. So they told us, this is what we want, this is what we need. These are the specific skill
sets. So you have a close relation with the industry
Definitely,
itself.
yes.
Right. Nicholas also mentioned about the importance of igniting creativity and the interest towards the game industry from the primary school level, secondary school level. So do you go to schools to educate them and create awareness about how big the game industry actually is and to attract them to take the course?
Definitely. I mean, the irony of it is this year itself, Pemandu has actually given us the green light to actually approach the secondary schools and to conduct workshops with both the school counsellors as well as the school the students as well. And we have a lot of activities planned for this year, ranging from competitions to workshops to talks and basically exhibitions about the game development industry. But I think going back to what Nicholas was saying as well, I 100% agree with the fact that I think Malaysians at the primary school and the secondary school level needs to have a lot of creative thinking, a lot of idea generation. I mean, we need to build up a nation of innovators and people who are creative. Yeah, I think that's the way forward, especially if you're going to go into the content industry.
Right. Changing the mind of the children is one thing, but what about changing the perception of the parents?
Well, I suppose if the parents knew or knows that there is a viable career choice, and that if their kids were to go and study, for example, animation or games, and they can make a living, and we're not talking about just making a living, we're talking about being really successful. We actually organize, KDU actually organizes a lot of talks, and some of the people that we bring in are actually local Malaysians who have worked overseas. One of them used to be a lead animator for Diablo 3, and if you must know, Diablo 3 was a huge game about a year ago. Every single Malaysian gamer worth his salt was waiting for that game. And here we have a Malaysian actually being a lead animator, and we have a lot of successful Malaysians working abroad in animation, in the movie industry, and definitely in games as well. Yeah, I think once the parents know that, then it's a different ball game altogether.
They will totally change your perception towards the profession and the industry itself.
Definitely.
So before we discuss further, we'll have another commercial break. So stay tuned on Biztalk, don't go anywhere.
I think although it's not very active right now, it's not really a course or something that a lot of people will pursue. It's definitely developing very quickly.
Well, currently, as I know from my information, that game development is growing as an industry because there are games in general. It's popular among certain age groups. People like to play games, and as a development, as an industry, it's growing.
I wouldn't say there is no potential in game development, just that in Malaysia, you don't see a lot of games coming out compared to like America, Europe, even the indie games where you can just make your own platform games, Apple games, those are on iPad and whatnot. It's very rare you see in Malaysia. So I would say if you're going to be a big business here in Malaysia, it'll be kind of hard because it'll be a very new industry compared to other countries.
I mean, there's future in game industry and stuff like that because I have a lot of friends who actually play games, and me myself also play games sometimes.
So far, I don't really heard much of any development in here, but I think it's a really good potential. I think because it's the market in here, I say there's a potential it will bloom, become better, because it's something new, so there's a lot of potential in it.
All right, that is the words from the streets that we got public opinions on the game industry, and most of them think that the game industry is not something to pursue. Right. And some even say that Malaysia doesn't produce enough games. There's not many games locally produced. So what is your comment on that?
I think as the My Game Dev initiative, we have our work cut out to basically educate these people. Like I was saying, Malaysia started into game development really early. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of Malaysians don't know that we have been doing PS2 games, we have been doing Game Boy Advance games, we have been doing PlayStation 1 games as well. One of my colleagues has his name credit to two games. One of it which is Sega All Stars Racing, and the other is Afro Samurai, and both are PS3 games. So that's Malaysia's contribution to the global market scene. And what I suppose is we have not done successfully is if we have not come up with our own brand. A Malaysian brand. Well, it's not true actually. There are some studios like E1 Studios have come out with their own games, But I think the volume of this is we haven't achieved that critical mass yet of games coming out from Malaysia, and I think to address that we really have to have the skilled talents, definitely, and to bring in the foreign direct investors is one thing, but the whole purpose of having the people like Codemasters, Ubisoft, is so that when the talents go in there and work, they actually, when they come out, they have the experience of the production pipeline. And that enables them to one day go out there with a few of their friends and develop the games. So yeah, that's something that we hope, and definitely is in the pipeline process as we speak.
I think another reason for the lack of awareness regarding local game companies is the fact that there's not much news, or they don't really know how successful these companies really are. So aside from Codemasters, one major game company, how do we churn out more major game companies in Malaysia?
Well, I think we need to let the international game development scene know that Malaysia has the necessary talent pool. That's why I keep harping on the fact that we need to build a critical mass of skilled talents. Definitely. And once we bring in more and more investors inside, they will say that, hey, why are these people there? You know, let's go and find out. I mean, at the end of the day, that's our long-term goal as well. But to answer that as well, a lot of Malaysians, here's something. A lot of Malaysians didn't know that the Life of Pi was done in, the 3D was done in Malaysia. A lot of Malaysians don't know that. And if you were to ask them a year ago, they would go like, Malaysia? Movies? Really?
Yes.
And the mindset has changed now.
It's not only on the game industry, but on the whole creative industry as well. We don't really have much awareness or even confidence, you know, to let the industry bloom.
Well, look at Upin and Ipin. They are really successful. I mean, they export their content overseas, and their merchandising market is huge. And it takes one Upin Ipin for games to happen, and that's where the explosion will come in.
Looking forward to that.
Definitely.
Right, before we continue, we have Twitter questions from our Twitter followers, so let's take a look. Okay, from Saiful Effendi. Are we ready to compete internationally?
Definitely, yeah. If you look at our talent, I think we have world-class talent, definitely. If we're talking about Malaysian content, well, like I was saying before, with iOS devices and the Apple Store, it has actually leveled the playing field. Yeah. So yeah, definitely, we are ready for the big boys actually. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's move on to the second Twitter question from Imran Razak. Does it cost much to start developing my own game? Well, we've heard in UK a teenager selling his game for millions. Maybe he's one of them, upcoming game developer.
Yeah.
So what's your say on that?
Well, it depends on what sort of games you want to produce. If you're going to develop a PC game, what we call the AAA games, like what Codemasters is doing, then yes, you need a significant investment. If you're going to create an Apple game, on your iPhone, really all you need is probably a license of USD 99, some software, and a whole lot of creativity, and programming know-how, as well as art know-how. So it's quite possible that you can actually create a game with less than 1,000 ringgit, not including computers, of course.
All right, but that's not too expensive. I mean, that's something achievable. Right. Aside from a bachelor program, do you have workshops or holiday programs for school kids who want to start early?
Well, we have this thing called, we collaborated with IGDA Malaysia, that's the International Game Developers Association of Malaysia, when we basically had this thing called the Global Game Jam. And at the same time, we ran something called the Global Game Jam Bootcamp. And we opened it to secondary school kids who basically spent 3 days developing a game from scratch.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and uploading their work to the server, to the Global Game Jam server. And I think we will run more of these sorts of workshops.
All right. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. Before we wrap up, any last words from you? In a nutshell, what's in the pipeline for KDU School of Creativity and Creative Media and Computing, and also for the game industry?
Well, I think look out for what we have planned for My Game Dev. Definitely with the competitions coming out, both for secondary school, tertiary education, the tertiary students, as well as the independent games industry as well. So do participate in these events. And for KDU, let's see where our talents end up. And in about 3 to 5 years, we're going to see some more Malaysian names in international games. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hyde, for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And with that, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to catch us at the same time next week on 502. I'm Prishri Mahira. Goodbye.
Thank you.